Welcome back, everybody, to What God Did podcast. Today we have a very special guest. Today is our Eliza's hubby, Gerald Cheng.
Hello,
Gerald Cheng.
hello.
We're super excited to have him here, and we feel very privileged. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah,
And
of course.
before Gerald shares his wonderful story, we're going to start with some rapid fire and get it going.
As always, just to break the ice a little bit. Are you ready, Gerald?
I'm ready as I can be.
Okay, so rapid fire means don't think about it. The first thing that comes to your mind, you
Impulsive
answer.
decision making. Got
Impulsive
it.
decision making. This is the
Got it.
time to shine. Okay. Early bird or night owl?
Early bird.
Beach or mountains?
Mountains, 100%.
Planner or spontaneous?
Planner.
Okay. Introvert or extrovert?
Extrovert.
Okay. Dog person or cat person?
Cat person, 100%. She wants the dog. I said no.
We're getting there.
We're getting there.
No,
Wait,
no.
are you just like don't like dogs at all?
It's too much work.
Okay.
Cats are a lot less work.
I mean, cats are more independent.
That's what I love about
Let's put
them.
it that way.
That's what I love about
Okay.
them.
Road trip or flight?
Flight.
It's quicker.
Mm.
You get to your
I love
destination.
flying. I love being on airplanes.
It's true.
Eliza also does not like being in airplanes. It's good. We contrast each other well.
I was gonna say
It's all right. It's all right. I mean,
I'm a kid on an airplane, you know.
I don't like memorize like airplane like models and like
No.
it's not my thing.
No,
I'm
wait,
just,
do
like,
you?
I know them. I don't like
Boeing,
research
like,
deeply,
whatever.
but I
I'm
understand what they are.
like,
Yeah.
Is it safe? That's all that matters.
Wait, so when you're on a plane, do you go to sleep right away, or are
No.
you like enjoying
I
the flight?
love when there's like the screen of like where you can see you're going, or like sometimes they have a tail
The
cam.
logistics
I like
screen.
understanding
That's what he's watching.
what type of plane it
Interesting.
is.
Interesting.
Interesting.
That is a word. Interesting. Okay. Well, let's go into a little bit of like faith questions.
Okay.
Hymns of contemporary worship.
Contemporary, specifically maybe a mix between gospel and contemporary would be where I'd be.
Okay. Yeah. A bigger church or smaller congregation.
Probably in the middle. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want too small, like 20, but I would like 150 is nice.
Yeah.
Sermon notes, like taking down notes, or
Mhm.
just merely taking in by listening.
Listening. Yeah.
Okay. Missions abroad or local outreach.
Local outreach, 100%. I think we forget that the mission field is everywhere. We think it's in Africa and we build a school for a week and then we leave them and say bye. But did they actually need the school, or we were just doing it for our own egos? Hot take, sorry.
Okay.
I can see that.
Yeah. Spontaneous worship or more conservative blend?
Spontaneous. Eliza knows I love this type of worship.
Yeah.
Are you spontaneous or?
I think a mix of both. I grew up in a more like conservative, like hymnal kind of like environment.
Yeah.
So I do see the beauty
Yeah.
with that.
Mhm.
But I do like an occasional spontaneous worship. I think I'm a little bit mix of both.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you?
I don't know. I'm still trying to figure it out.
So trying to figure it
Yeah.
out? That's so valid. Yeah.
That's why I love like hearing people's stories and like
Yeah.
different things, so that it opens your eyes to other possibilities.
Mm.
But yeah.
Yeah, and today we get to hear Gerald's perspective on faith and life.
Yeah.
Sure.
So let's start from the beginning. Did you
Yeah.
grow up as a Christian, or what was kind of like your upbringing?
Yeah, so I grew up a Christian. Specifically, my parents were of the Seventh-day Adventist tradition, so that means, we worship on Saturday. And I grew up in a town that had a lot of these Christians as well. So I went to church and school that is Seventh-day Adventist, and it was the norm. I would say faith was important to me. I got baptized when I was in 5th grade. I think I was a very obedient child. I think part of my makeup as a person is I think I receive love by achieving. So if you're familiar with the Enneagram, I'm an Enneagram 3. So that means I have to in order to receive love, I need to do all the things that need to be done. So, excelling in school, one, extracurriculars, being involved in church, And I felt like that action would be rewarded, I guess, by my goal at the time in high school was get a full ride to wherever I wanted to go. Long story short, I couldn't, and that kind of really tore my foundation of what I thought was right. As in, if I did all this work, why God didn't I get a full ride? And I also think my faith was very feelings based, as in heavily influenced by the surroundings that I was, a lot of the music that I was a part of doing was very, emotionally based. You think Hillsong, you think Elevation, Hands Raised kind of thing. And um, outside of that space, where is God if I'm not feeling him? As in, do I have objectionable evidence or logical understanding of like how God could exist? So like that sort of put me in a tailspin, right? My core narrative of if I succeed, God will give me what I want. And I feel like looking back, my understanding of God was like he's just a genie, and as long as I do what I think he wants me to do, then he'll give me what I want. And when he didn't, then that set me on this like, is God real? And I went down like the how do I know Jesus was an actual person? How do I know he actually died? If he died, how do I know if he actually resurrected? How can I trust the Bible? Sort of these like fundamental questions that I think sometimes when you grow up in a faith tradition, you don't ask these questions or it's not explored. So that was at the end of my senior year heading into college, and I felt like I gained some level of perspective on the logical side of things, but then I focused so much on the logical piece of things that I forgot the importance of, I guess, the emotional side of things, as if I went on a seesaw and everything was very logically based. College, I think at the start for me was rough because I'm a very routine-based person, and routines were changing, pressure was higher. I wanted to go to med school. I'm a doctor now, but at the time it was like, oh, like these classes matter, the grades matter, and I need to succeed in order to get to that goal. And it just became so overwhelming that I don't know, I just got into this emotional rut that I was like back in the doubt train again. And I remember asking God, and I said, if you are real, show me a sign, or else I'm just going to walk away.
And did he show you a sign?
Well.
And what was that? But
yeah.
Wait, so how old were you when all of these questions started occurring and you started questioning your faith? And
18.
18, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so where did that lead you?
Yeah, so like I said, I had a bunch of logical conclusions maybe for the existence of God, but then I lost that feeling component, right? Like I didn't really feel like he was there when things were chaotic and overwhelming. So I'll try to summarize this story as best as I can. I have a good friend of mine who we grew up together in high school, but he was in a different high school than I was, but we kept in touch. And he went to a university here in Tennessee called Southern Adventist University. And he was someone that I thought I could reach out to at, so at 3 a.m. I sent him a text. I said, hey, like, I need help. I'm going through a lot. And he like, hey, let's talk at like 7 a.m. And for him, before this conversation, he was actually trying to get home for the weekend. His mom was getting baptized, and that was a whole big thing. He grew up in a sort of a split household of a Adventist Christian and a Catholic, and there was a lot of tension. And so this was a big moment for his mom, who was a Catholic, who decided to get baptized, and he was going to go back and preach. He was a seminary student, and long story short, his flight got canceled. And he was so mad at God. He's like, why is my flight got canceled, right? So we're like, hey, like, I reach out, hey, let's talk. This is Sunday. He tried to fly home on Friday. And we're chatting, and I share with him everything that's going on, like I am struggling to find faith. And he's like, here, Gerald, let's look at Hebrews 11, right? Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not yet seen. There is evidence there is logical, objective evidence that can point toward a God on earth. You can look at the likelihood of intelligent life forming. You can look at the actual structure of the earth and how so many things in physics require these exact constants. You can look at the intricate design of human cells, and you can look at the fact that we need like 10, 12 different factors for life to sustain on earth, right? But that will never prove the existence of God. And there's also a substance of things hoped for. There is the faith component that God works and is seen through experience and is seen through the lives of others and how God moved in their lives. And he's like, Gerald, I feel like you need to find a balance between the emotional side and the physical side. Sorry, yeah, the objective side and the sort of emotional subjective side. There's sort of a balance of the emotional and the intellect that faith always holds. And then he shares me the story about, like I said earlier, how he couldn't catch a plane. He was trying to go home. And then he said, Gerald, I got to be honest. I think if I caught that plane and was at home and was preaching that sermon, I would have been so busy that I would have not had time to have this conversation we're having right now. And that to me was like a watershed moment. I was crying, and I was like, to me, that was the sign I needed, right? Like, maybe God canceled this flight for him so that he could have this conversation with me in that exact moment that I needed it, to see that the hand of God was moving in the way that I needed some tangible, objective experience of mine to say, God moved then. That's what God did for me then. And yeah, that was sort of a renaissance of my faith when I realized that, like, God can move in ways where just beyond our personal shadow of doubt, that I can see how God moved for me.
I feel like every person who has experienced that first moment of, like, whether they ask for a sign or it happens like through other people's prayers, it's so strong. Do you still reflect back on that moment when times get hard?
It's kind of crazy. I don't think I've doubted that God exists after that moment. I think it was more of like doubting God's plan. But I feel like that's sort of like if you look at the story of Jacob, and where he falls asleep and there's like, he has the vision of the ladder going up to heaven, right? And after that dream that he got from God, it was sort of like he erected an altar, a pillar, Bethel, to symbolize that moment for him. Like that was like my Bethel for me, that I can know in my own certainty that God exists and that he is watching out for me. So it's given me a level of certainty that, even when I have a level of doubt, I can still doubt about certain things, but I don't doubt that God is present in the moment and that I'll have to walk through the journey with him.
I think there's a big moment where it shifts for people, where their faith in God, because you do, I think, struggle with the fact, like, how all of those questions, right? Is he real? Did he really get resurrected? I think those are questions that people still struggle with till this day. And unless and you have that moment where God does show himself to you. Was there any other memorable moments like that keeps your faith in God, where it's not questioning his plans and stuff, but for a fact, like, he's there. Yeah. Like, he showed up for you. And how did that shift all the way where you don't question anymore? Without a doubt.
I had, I think, pretty good answers to those questions for myself. So, for example, let's just explore. Let's say Jesus didn't get resurrected, okay?
Yeah.
There's a lot of historical evidence that points toward the existence of a man named Jesus on earth. There's more evidence for that than the evidence of Alexander the Great. Yeah, we don't question that Alexander the Great existed. Yes. So Jesus was a person on earth that was witnessed and died on the cross. The part that we can't verify or is in question is whether this man rose again and it was he God, and things of that nature. Now people may say like Jesus was a good man. He said a lot of good things. You can read the Gospels, a lot of good parables and stories that we can take. It's sort of like maybe he was a good teacher. Even secular people still point to Jesus as a positive influence. I mean, they are still elements of, do unto others as you would have them do to you. You talk about equality, liberty, civil rights. I mean, these things are all equated into some of the teachings that Jesus is saying. Now, Jesus never actually said he was a good teacher. He made it very clear that he was God, or he claimed he was God, right? So if someone claims they're God, there's only two options. One is they're lying and they're just trying to gather attention, momentum, whatever. They're not telling the truth. Or two, it's true. There is no in between of Jesus was a good teacher, because the person did not claim that. The person claimed they were God. And either you're insane or you are, right? So that's where I go, right? Now, did Jesus resurrect? We know that after the resurrection, or reported resurrection of Jesus that went to heaven, that the disciples preached that Jesus was resurrected and spread Christianity, right? If I were one of the 12, okay, and it was Friday night, and I just saw my leader die on the cross, if Jesus didn't get resurrected, it would take a lot. I would say it's a stretch for me to think that these disciples would fake the resurrection of Jesus, one, then preach about it as it actually happened, and then tell the world that it happened and be willing to die for that. It's hard for me to think that 12 men would die for a lie.
And it's also the way they died.
Yeah, a gruesome death.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Horrible. Going to prison, being stoned, being
crucified upside down, right?
Like, yes.
So that to me points toward the higher likelihood. Like I can't fathom someone dying for a lie, which points me toward the higher likelihood that God existed. Now, nothing can be fully verifiable because we do not have video evidence, all sorts of things that would verify this, which that is important because I think God, that's where faith steps into the picture. Faith has to ask us to take a step of belief in something that we cannot see or verify and trust. Jesus spoke about blessed are you disciples that you can see. Blessed are those even though they do not see, still believe, right? And that's that faith jump that every single person in Christianity has had to make outside of the disciples and those who witnessed him resurrection. So that's where I come into the picture of like, okay. And then the question becomes, okay, if this man was God, they said it was, like, what is the gospel that he's really preaching? And to me, the threads of Christianity about love for neighbor, love for God, just the tenets of treating others with respect, compassion, dignity, mercy, these are qualities or values that transcend. I mean, they're incredible, first of all, and you see these threads now integrated into Western society, maybe not explicitly referencing God, but we call for social justice, we call for equality, we call for the dignity and the value of human life. That all comes from Christianity. So Christianity has had an indelible mark on humanity. Not to say there have been definitely problems with how people have utilized the name of Christ for their own personal gain. At the same time, like, let's say the hospital system, our healthcare system as we know it today was started by early Christians who saw Romans going through various level of plagues and still decided to help these Romans even if it meant costing them their life. The first hospitals were run by Christians. The first big institutions in the United States were run by Christians who were trying to, give good healthcare to people. So that's where I see God's hand, not only in whether or not Jesus existed and he was God, but also God's hand throughout the narrative of history about he seeks to bring about healing and bringing the kingdom of heaven on earth, right? Like how God is also here and in the process of creating the kingdom on earth while we also wait for the kingdom of heaven to come. There's this sort of tension that I see that takes place.
So if you were talking to somebody who either is questioning their faith with God or have left God for
Yeah.
various reasons, which can get really, personal because
Very nuanced.
Yeah.
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 And or if they don't even know God and but they've heard of God or
Sure,
in
sure.
Jesus because
Sure.
it's everywhere now, I guess what would one of your advice be to them with, I guess, their calling, their faith, their
Yeah.
path with God?
It's funny, like you say the word advice. I feel like the first thought that came to my mind was, I just want to hear their story.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
One of my favorite songs, Good Good Father, I've heard thousands of stories of what they think you're like. Now, the God that may have been portrayed to them is not the God that I know and the God that exists.
Mm.
And so I think it's perfectly understandable for someone to leave the faith because the God that they were told is not the true God. Or in a sense, let me say this, like if I was told that whatever their depiction of God was God, I would have a tough time to believing in that depiction of God. And I think there's a faithfulness, or God honors people who decide to walk away from faith because the picture of God that was told to them is not the actual nature of God. And so I think God can work and is bigger than our belief. I think God still exists despite our belief or non-belief in him. It's just a matter of, what story were you told? What was hard for you to believe in that story? What do you wish the story was? Because, I mean, if you go the whole other way and you say, no God exists, you can go very easily into nihilism. Nothing matters. Everything is just happenstance, chance. I mean, that's a sucky place to live too. It's very hopeless. And so then people say, well, I have, I create meaning and value. I strive for, goodness and things like that. And then my question is, what do you derive as a source of goodness? I mean, what defines goodness? If you say, Grace, to me that, oh, I think that killing people is a good thing to do. And I say, oh, I don't think so. And then you're like, well, I can just call good whatever I want. And, it's just, that's what it is. There's a disconnect there. There's some underlying value that I think we all as society point to toward what is good or not. Now, there's an argument from the evolutionary side that it's like, well, we strive for what is good just so that our society can benefit and move forward. So maybe killing people is a bad thing because, we want to continue to grow as a society and get better. And my response to that, or my question to that, would be, well, okay, but I mean, technically, people who have, like, let's say, end stage Alzheimer's or have severe, medical conditions, like, it's not a net benefit in the objective sense to keep these people alive. Yet, why do we have a struggle of saying, why don't, like, what's wrong with euthanizing them if that's the case? If you want to pull from that standpoint, right? Because underneath that, there is a conversation that all human life has dignity, value, and worth. What gives that? Yeah. We cannot prescribe that unto ourselves. Yeah. There, I think, it points toward an outside source of good that gives that value, that gives that worth. That, to me, that essence of what that is God. And we're all searching to discover what that is and the nature of that. And to me, Christianity paints such an amazing picture of that thing is not just an absent source. It is invested in, that God is invested in and daily involved in walking in our lives. So that's why the picture of Christianity to me makes so much sense in a logical and emotional manner, in a personal and also societal way of seeing the world.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned that because I think that's essentially what our ministry is here at What God Did is to listen to people's stories and
Yeah.
kind of giving them a space and a platform to share something that may be so vulnerable, something that may be so nuanced, something that may be still trying to figure it out. You know, I
Right,
don't think
right.
this is a conclusion that you
No.
came to
Mhm.
overnight
No.
or over a
Yeah.
week. You know,
Yeah.
it's a daily wrestle and struggling and questioning and curiosity that brought you to this.
Yeah.
What is your daily walk with God? How does that look like? Because, yeah, like you said, it is a daily struggle.
I think for me, I'm a very person of habits, and
Likes his routine.
I love my
as you
routine.
mentioned
My routine.
earlier.
And when I say I'm an early bird, I think I need an element of time where I spend with God before I interact with the world. Now, it's changed over the years. Sometimes I would walk for an hour and pray. Sometimes I would read scripture and sort of have a conversation with God. I've sometimes felt guilty when I'm not spending that amount of time, but I feel like my journey has been like, as long as I come to the throne on a daily basis and say, God, I'm here, I'm your servant, like, help guide me, help lead me. That orientation, that vertical orientation helps me move toward the day, hopefully with more element of grace and mercy. And it's like the common phrase, you cannot give what you do not possess, right? I cannot give people love if I'm not receiving from a source of love. So that's sort of my understanding, is that I really need God's guidance, love, mercy, grace to then imbue that to others, because that's not coming from me.
Was this habit developed throughout time? Because from that moment where you got that sign from God
Yeah.
through your friend, where you're
Yeah.
like, okay, I'm not questioning my faith in God anymore.
Mm-hmm.
What did how did your life transition in the aspect of like your routines with God?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I had to learn how to read the Bible.
Yeah.
I
How
felt like
did that start?
I had, again, similar, I had, my friend Ridge, who was able to help me out, and just taking, daily steps toward that process, like getting a physical Bible, thinking about, how do I read a text? How do I understand the context of which the text was written? How do I understand that there's actually Greek and Hebrew words behind every word? And when I'm reading a word, there's actually another meaning in another language that's giving more depth to the word than what I'm reading, that I'm reading with 21st century glasses, and that I have to look at things from a first century Jew or Greek perspective, and so that took time.
Yeah.
Right. I feel like when it comes to the walk of faith, we wish for instant results. We live in a world where if I want something, I can just order it and it will be my house in 5 hours.
Amazon. Shout out.
I mean, then we take social media. Now we take AI, right? We have a world in which like information can be handed to us, knowledge can be handed to us instantly. But this world does not teach us how to be discernful of information, how to be wise. Wisdom is not built overnight. You can sound wise when you ask ChatGPT or Claude to create, whatever, like, it can sound right, but you don't actually know what you're talking about if you don't actually interact with any sort of material that you're referencing. And so, like, when it comes to God, we love the instant, like, I just want to be close with God right now. And it's like expecting in a relationship, if you started dating someone, that you knew them instantly and they knew you instantly like that. No, it's a walk. I mean, the term relationship implies two people getting to know one another, and God is teaching stuff more about him and also about you. And sometimes you're not ready for some lessons, that it's going to take you sometimes a journey through something that you didn't see in order for you to learn that aspect about yourself. So as part of my struggle is, I love growth. I just want to grow. And I'm like, oh God, I just want to grow. I just want to grow. Like, I just want to be better. And God's like, don't make that the idol. walk with me. Just value the journey of taking the daily steps, and I'm going to show you when you're ready, and I'll help you through that. Like, that doesn't mean I don't have questions about how, for example, we are living in a very crazy time in human history. How is God here in this moment, in this particular time? I don't know, but I am learning through the process of the journey. And I'm saying, if God was present during the empire of the Roman Empire, or if God was present during the Babylonian Empire, if God was present in the midst of World War II, God is present now. I just don't know how he's moving, but I will walk with him and hope. And I see pockets and spaces perhaps where he's moving. Maybe not in the grand scheme of things, but I have to trust that if God has moved in my behalf, that God is also moving behind the scenes in a way that I don't understand.
Do you have any books that you would recommend to like our listeners that has really spoken to you, that's really like stood out to you? Any off the top of your mind?
Oh man, that's a good question. I would say one of my favorite authors goes by the name of Peter Scazzero. He writes about emotional health. He started with a book called Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. I actually interacted with the book Emotionally Healthy Leadership first, and I felt like that really helped me center on principles, on practices, on disciplines of what does it mean to actually have the inner life of God? What does that look like? Because these things are disciplines, right? It's like you have to learn how to do these basic things. It's like when you're a human, the basic things you need to learn how to do is eat, drink, sleep. Like,
Hygiene.
yeah. In the same way, in our relationship with God, there are certain disciplines that we need to develop over time. Not to say that that earns you salvation, because to me, salvation is given freely to those who believe in Christ as our Lord. Yet, God is like, these are the disciplines that you can help. We can grow closer through these disciplines. A great author, he is deceased now, rest his soul, Timothy Keller. He's a fantastic pastor. He's wrote a lot of different books about various things. I'm reading a book about rediscovering Jonah. He has a great book on the prodigal God, about the story of the prodigal son and how we tend to focus a lot on the younger brother, the one that left the rebel, and we don't focus on the older brother. And the older brother also was separated from his father, also, even though he was in his father's presence. Let's see what else.
Maybe we can link all of these books
Yeah.
in the description. Yeah, love Timothy Keller's books. I think he has such a wide range of things that he talks about. Like, it could be like marriage or faith or yeah.
I'll give one more. I love resources that connect to understanding this current moment. There's a pastor by the name of Mark. Oh man, I forgot his last name, but his podcast is called Rebuilders by Red Church. He's a Australian pastor. He is one of the most insightful pastors in integrating current geopolitical, political, like just social, cultural moments, and how is God moving in these spaces, or how can we as Christians navigate these moments and still reach people with Christ, right? Because these things are, for example, right? There's a war versus Iran right now. Everyone is feeling it at the gas pump, right? There are things that is happening in this world that everyone will feel. COVID, right? How do you navigate this as a Christian? So I feel like he's been a very great resource for me in interpreting like current like moments in time.
I think I found his podcast. It's called Rebuilders. Pastor Mark Sayers.
Mark Sayers, that's it. Mark
Liddy
Sayers.
and Daniel.
They're awesome.
Absolutely. We'll link it for you guys because I think it's really important to have references and have books and podcasts that you can go to help you through your journey, because everybody's journey is different. But at the same time, there is a good foundational level where when you have that, it helps with your build. I did also want to ask you about like your prayer life. Has that changed throughout your walk with God? And if so, what does, like, in what aspect?
Yeah, so I adopt this format of prayer that When I get to a certain point, you'll be like, oh, interesting. So I start with like Thanksgiving, right? I say thank you, God, for like the first thing I try to do to wake up, thank you. And then confession of sins or areas where I felt like I felt short. And then requesting, like asking of God what I need. And then I've adopted this posture ever since 18, where I say, speak, God, for your servant is listening. It's kind of like what Eli said in the story of Samuel. And I don't know if it's me, my conscience, but I feel like as if God then speaks to me through my voice. And again, it sounds kind of wild, but that's why I don't talk about it often. But it's sort of like I'm processing the moment. And again, I feel like as if God's speaking to me in that moment. Now, is that sort of like if I'm doing internal therapy work, whatever. For me, I have this belief that God is speaking to me. And it's also a way, because I'm in the field of mental health, I'm a psychiatry resident. I do think it is important for us to have daily time set aside to process what is going on, because we build baggage over the days of the things we deal with and struggle with. And I see prayer as a way to unload that baggage and give it to God and help God process that moment. And so after that, I just sort of have this kind of like weird conversation for a bit with God. And then, maybe I journal about it. I read, a book, or I read the Bible after that.
I think if anyone's like looking for ideas on like where to start or how to start, I think that could be a suggestion.
Yeah,
incorporating an element of journaling,
sure.
prayer, taking in external resources, and figure out what works best for you. I think there isn't an exact blueprint of what 100%. Your devotional life should look like.
Yeah.
Like some people say, like in their whole life, they've never heard the voice of God, right? And it's such a subjective thing that I can't say, if you say this, like you're going to hear like a booming voice from heaven. No, like it's literally like kind of my voice talking to myself. But maybe I feel like God speaks and compels through conscience. I mean, a part of what we try to do when things are tough is we suppress, or we go to whatever means to distract ourselves from that underlying angst that we're experiencing. And when you are in the presence of God, or when you come to God, putting away those sort of barriers, I feel like God meets you and brings up some uncomfortable thoughts for you to work through. And again, if it gets very dark, let's be clear, if you're in a space where like you don't want to live anymore, like that's when you seek help, right? Having said that, like I don't think good mental health, especially when we talk about faith and mental health, is just pretending that everything's okay. I think it's an acknowledgement that we all have things that we struggle with. And I think God meets us there in the struggle and helps us walk through the struggle, not necessarily avoiding it. So
I think that's really important to talk about as well, because we were actually talking about this right before we started recording this podcast. It's like that line between where faith and actual help, like medical help, comes together, right? Because I've been struggling, and so I was asking Gerald for some, I guess, advice. Do you mind touching base on a little bit of that, of like where it is important to seek medical advice and not, because I was honestly feeling guilty for
seeking mental health help.
Because I was taking medicine and I got off of it, and I was really like praying that God will carry me through. But it's been really hard, and I feel like it's like the longer I'm going off of my medication, it's just becoming more difficult to like handle. So
right. So I was using this analogy with Grace earlier. Let's say you struggle with high blood pressure, and the doctor says, hey, you can eat, this sort of diet to help reduce your blood pressure, low salt. Eliza knows all these things as the dietitian in the room. But there's a limit to how much these things can help. Some people have hypertension just cause. There's actually like, I don't know, a huge percentage of people with hypertension that there's no actual cause for it. It is.
Hereditary, genetic.
Right. There's so many things. So then your doctor says, here's a medication, lisinopril or whatever, losartan. And it's like, this will help reduce your blood pressure so that you can reduce your risk of stroke and heart attack and all sorts of things that could go wrong. And we're like, yeah, okay, that's great for the most part, right? And there's no element of morality in that language. There is a, hey, we're going to help improve your overall physical health. This is going to be a tool. It's not the only thing that's going to help. You also have to choose lifestyle habits, exercising, sleeping well, stress management. So many things affect blood pressure. And we've developed medications through the use of science to help improve your blood pressure. Mental health is a complicated thing. There may be people biologically predisposed. You may be going through various levels of trauma or experience various levels of trauma that affected the way you live. You may live in a rough part of town. You may be with parents who abuse you. And you may have faith, but also maybe faith spaces have hurt you or made you lose sight or may have affected your mental health in a negative way. And so there's I adopt a biopsychosocial spiritual model, right? That humans are affected by various things. And so when it comes to mental health, I think it's hard in faith tradition because there's a morality complex to when someone says they're depressed, the assumption is they're far from God, therefore they need to be closer to God in order for the depression to go away. I think that's far from the truth. You can look at various biblical characters who struggled with probably symptoms of depression. You look at Elijah.
Anxiety.
Anxiety too, right? You look at Jesus was experiencing doubt. Jesus was filled with sadness at seeing when Lazarus died. But more than that, thinking about the Jewish people and how they were turning away from him. These are natural things to happen. Sadness is not bad. Now, when we call clinical depression in the world of mental health, we look at certain criteria. Are you sleeping well? Do you have desire or things you want to move? Do you have persistent thoughts of guilt and worthlessness? I could keep going on, but criteria that points toward an excessive period in time where you're feeling more down and depressed than ever. Now, depression is by far one of the most costly, I guess, disabilities, I'll use that word, that affect our society. Lost work hours, it basically costs billions of dollars. I don't have the exact amount, but it affects your life. It affects people's life. And so when we say we want you to get mental health help, humanity has also developed and tried to figure out ways in which to help people through depression. Now, two big modalities. One is medications, one is therapy. Let's start with medications. I don't think medications fix your depression. I think medications help reduce your depression so that you can actually process and think through things what you're going through. It also reduces your depression so that you don't feel like you just don't want to get out of bed and perhaps want to kill yourself, right? Because at the end of the day, we want you to keep living. And I think medications help for you to then do things that can help, like exercising. Actually, exercising has just a significant amount of benefit as an antidepressant. Now, when I say that, some people are like, oh, you should just exercise. Well, I'm like, okay, but some people can't even get out of bed because they're so depressed. So is the solution exercising for them? No, I'd say both. Why not? Right? Therapy in its perfect sense is about helping the person navigate and process what they're going through. Now, I think there is a danger of therapy culture to just say you need therapy alone and that your therapist is sort of like a godlike figure that you turn to for your source of advice. No, we're not going that far, right? There are different sources: medications, therapy, your religious community, your family. All these things play a role in helping you move forward. I just think we do a disservice when we moralize seeking mental health as a weakness, as a deficit,
as a stigma.
Yeah. Again, the moralization of these things, when depression, for example, we all throw out the word depression. Well, some people can depress for various reasons. There's unipolar depression, there's bipolar depression, there's substance-induced depression, there's depression due to medical conditions. So just to say and have a sort of reductionist statement that it is solely due to a lack of faith, I think is a very simplistic way of viewing the world, and these are said by people who are not aware of the complexity of mental health.
Yeah, I think it's super important to seek help when you need help, and because God is always carrying you, but there are actual chemical imbalances and stuff that I think it's important to be aware of and to seek attention.
It's part of the toolbox that you have.
One of the many toolboxes.
So, okay, the reason why I asked you about prayer life is because I feel like in the beginning of my journey, like prayer seemed so simple, right? You just talk to God. But I feel like it's one of the most difficult things to do, like as I'm walking my journey. So, just want you guys to know that it is okay to have your falls and ups and downs. And, you know, this walk's not always going to be sugar-coatedly perfect, you know?
Thank you so much for spending time with us.
No
This
problem.
is such a treat.
Yes.
And I believe that we might be having you on again to talk about the latter part of your journey.
There was the part where he said it's one thing questioning the faith of God, and then also the path that he's taking you on, right? And so we wanted to also talk more about that, but just because of time, we decided to do a part 2, and we will be bringing Joe back to discuss more about your actual walk with God, and even if you may not agree with the direction that God may be calling you for, and like how to navigate that, because Gerald also has his personal testimony on that as well. So we're super excited for part 2 on that. But thank you so much for today, because I think you've given us so much to think about and to process, and also to help guide each and every step with Christ, because you know it's not one directional either. And so thank you so much. If there's anything that you want to add?
I mean, I'll just close by saying it's a journey, right? So take that one step day by day.
I love that. So thank you guys so much for joining, and we're going to have a word of prayer to wrap everything up.
Our Father in heaven, like to thank you again so much for giving us time where we can just talk about you, the good, the bad, and you know, just everything in between. Thank you for guiding us through, even as we're figuring out and untangling the messiest parts of ourselves, and being so ever patient in guiding us through that journey. I want to ask for a special blessing over those who are listening, that they as they are figuring out their journey, or as they're walking with you, that you will continue to be with them and give them peace and wisdom and curiosity as they continue figuring out. We ask this in your name. Amen.
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 And I'm going to link all of the books that Joan referenced below. Also the podcast with Pastor Mark
Sayers.
Yes.
And maybe I'll ask Gerald to add some other books, extra books.
Sure.
Yeah, and we'll send it over to the podcast.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
So if you guys need any reference or anything to kind of help you with your path, check below in the description. They will all be linked. And do you want to also add your podcast? Because I know that you're not active in it, but like...
Yeah, sure. I ran a podcast between 2019 and 2020 called Our Faith Journey. So it's interview style, similar to this. And I talk about some of these principles, like the inner life, the outer life. I actually go through the Enneagram. It's a pretty fun journey of mine. So, yeah.
Yeah, we'll also link that for you guys too. And thank you guys for joining us, and we will see you in 2 weeks.